Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and I'm back today with my mother Joanne. You all loved our Tudor nonfiction video that we did. I tend to read more Tudor fiction, which was also quite popular, but I brought my mother, the nonfiction lover, in to talk about Tudor nonfiction.
Yeah.
You all loved it as well. So she very bravely decided to tell us about all of the books and sites and other resources that she used to figure out the War of the Roses that created the Tudors.
Yes.
You spent years working on this.
Oh, it's been a lifetime, it feels like. I think the only reason I got interested in it was way back in the dark ages when I was in college. I had a very interesting professor in a Shakespeare class that I took. And Dean Julian Mates, may he rest in peace, was incredible. He was an actor as well as a scholar, and he did The Wooing of Lady Anne. He played both parts, hopping from one side of the desk to the other, adopting different voices and body postures. It was remarkable. I've never seen anything like it in my life, before or since. He was incredible. But I didn't quite have the history behind it. I appreciated the scene he did, but I didn't really have the history behind it, being more of a Tudor person at the time. So it's kind of been not quite an obsession, but something that I've been working on. And the War of the Roses is very confusing. There's just no getting around it. Common knowledge says that the War of the Roses started because Henry V died quite young, and his son was a baby, and so there was a protectorate. And there were a lot of warring factions, and there was a big power struggle. I am of the opinion that the War of the Roses started because Edward III had too many sons that lived. It's very, very confusing. I mean, back in the day when so many children died, he was very fortunate. He had a huge family. Most of them lived. And what I used to do with young people when they would come to the library, and if they had a large topic such as this, I would hand them World Book Encyclopedia and say, read this article first so you have an idea of the time period and the cast of characters that created this situation.
Okay.
Then you can go on to larger books to get more and better details on the topic.
Yeah, start with the basics.
You start
and
with the
then
basics
go
because
forward.
you have to know who you're talking about. And nobody uses encyclopedias anymore. So I have discovered something that I really like, and it's a very good website. I think it's British, it probably is. And it's www.waroftheroses.com. I mean, what could
Who
be
knew?
easier than that? It's wonderful. It's got all of the family trees for the House of York and the House of Lancaster. It gives you a whole cast of characters because heaven knows there were a lot of them, and so many of them had the same names. There were so many Richards, it'll drive you crazy. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to embark on this, you might want to try that website. It could be really, really interesting. So going along with my particular theory that Edward III had too many children, I would recommend starting with this, The Plantagenets by Dan Jones. Now, I know in the other episode that we did, I said that, Antonia Fraser and Robert Massey are my two favorite historians, but Tracy Borman is coming up. So is Dan Jones. I really, really like Dan Jones. I think I own a number of his books.
Mm-hmm.
This one is really, really good. And it starts, right from the beginning with the plant, and it goes, it's terrific. I love this book. It's even got a few illustrations, but it kind of lays out the cast of characters. And I don't know why so many people seem to think that kings and queens in England have had this very quiet and stately procession from one to the other. Nothing could be further from the truth. This book is incredible. It is so much fun to read, and I really like his style. So I would recommend starting with this book. And then, this was a very good book. It's all about John of Gaunt. He was one of Edward III's sons. And he's kind of a mentor for Edward the... Was he the mentor for Edward IV? I'm going to get this wrong. Anyway, he's very important. He didn't rule in his own right, but he was kind of like the godfather of the family. People turned to him for advice. He had several wives, and this is the biography of Catherine Swynford, who was his mistress, and then he married her. She became the third wife. She begins the line of the Beauforts. And this is where we get Henry VII because, and I'm going to get this wrong, but through Catherine Swynford, we get to Henry VII's mother, Margaret Beaufort. So she's really important. This is by Alison Weir. She's a really good historian. I will say that this book was really difficult to get through, and not because she's not my favorite, but she had so little to go on. I mean, she really had to piece her life together because initially she wasn't that important. She turned out to be very important, but her early life and her relations, and they had to piece a lot of it together from other documents. So it's meticulous, but it's not a quick read, but important, and I really enjoyed it. This is a book I really, really like. It's a doorstop. It's called The Brothers York by Thomas Penn. He wrote the Winter King, which was about Henry VII. This is all about Edward IV and their brother George, Duke of Clarence, and Richard III, and all of them. And it's amazing. It really, really helped sort out sequences of events, who married who and why, where everyone lived and what they were responsible for.
Who was ruling at any given point, which
Yeah.
I find very hard to follow in the Shakespearean Wars of the Roses.
It's the Hollow Crown is something that you could talk about too. We'll get to that in a minute, but nonetheless, I found this really helpful. It really sorted a number of things out for me. I will say I'm still having trouble with the sequence of all the battles and who died where because there's a lot of death. But it's a really good book, and I really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend this one. Now, having said that, we're getting close to the main characters now.
Well,
Okay.
they're all main characters, which is what makes it such a huge topic.
Yes, a lot of main characters. What was the expression? Too many cooks and not enough waiters?
I guess.
Everybody wanted to be king. Everyone wanted the power. And this man, Warwick, is known as the Kingmaker. I was not familiar with Paul Kendall. I don't know that I've ever read anything else that he's written. But this is just about Warwick the Kingmaker. And as his title, because he was commonly known as that, he's the one that helped to get Edward IV on the throne. But it didn't stop there. Because then when he got annoyed with Edward IV, because Edward IV decided to flex his own muscles and did not want his help, he turns around and goes over to the other side. And that makes such confusion. But a fascinating person, not royal, but one of the protectors, because Henry VI was an infant when his father died. So he was part of that power struggle during the prince's youth. And a really interesting person. So I would recommend this too. Now, none of these are what you would call quick reads. I think you have to plan on a couple of years for this because it's a lot of material. And now we get to the main player, I think. The Shadow King. This is a biography of Henry VI. The poor soul. I mean, nobody really knows what his problem was. He was not a good ruler. He, by all accounts, a nice man, very pious, wanted to be a good king, just never really got a handle on it.
Well, with so many people
Yeah,
influencing him and pulling him in so many directions and making the decisions for him,
for so many years.
how could he learn?
Yeah, so he did not have good instruction, and temperamentally, I don't know that he was suited for it. But there you are, you're the son of a king, you don't really have a lot of choice. It was a good book. I was not familiar with Lauren Johnson, but it was a really good book. I enjoyed it. It's a doorstop. It's quite large. Really good. I would highly recommend this one. Now, he was married to Margaret of Anjou. I don't have a biography solely devoted to her, but this book, which was amazing, is called She-Wolves by Helen Castor. The last chapter is devoted to Margaret of Anjou. And that poor girl, 14 years old, they shipped her over to England and to this young man who wasn't sure he wanted to get married, and it took them a long time to have a child. And all of the tumult of the court and the power struggles, and she aligns herself with one faction, And yeah, it's really, really good and confusing, definitely. The other women that they outline are also very good. These are all of the women that ruled before Elizabeth. Let me see, who do we have? We have, oh yes, this also has the first chapters about Matilda, who was in the battle with her cousin Stephen to be the first Queen of England. That was fascinating. I really enjoyed that. If you watched Brother Cadfael with Derek Jacobi on television a while ago, it's all about that power struggle, and that was a really good chapter. I enjoyed that one. And then there was another chapter about Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was one of my mother's favorites, her name being Eleanor. She thought she was quite fabulous. And then Isabella, who I don't remember, which is a terrible thing to admit.
Was she King John's wife?
I'm not sure if she was John's wife. He had 2 wives, and she
I
might
feel like
have been
one of them
them.
was named Isabella, but that may not be her either.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about the third one. But anyway, it was really good. And I think I'm trying to remember there was a television show about she-wolves, and she narrated it. I think it was on Amazon Prime. And
I think it only covered 3 of them.
I thought it was awful. Anyway,
Anyway.
it was really good, and I enjoyed it, which prompted me to buy the book. So anyway, if you want to learn a little bit more about Margaret of Anjou, this is the one you want. Now, this one I haven't read. This is Heather's copy.
I have read it.
Okay.
The one I have read.
Okay. Princes in the Tower by Alison Weir. Over to you. Would you like to speak about it, or do you want me to? I mean, it's
you didn't tell me I was going to do this.
Oh, well, I can do it. I mean, I know enough about it that I can talk about it.
No, let me try.
Okay.
This is Alison Weir trying to solve the mystery of what happened to the princes in the tower. If you've seen or read Richard III, you know that he had 2 nephews who were Edward the Fifth's sons. Okay.
No, Edward the Fourth's son. The son was Edward.
Would have been Edward
the
the
Fifth,
and may or may not have been. This is why it all gets very confusing. But
Yeah.
anyway,
right?
and so they were put into his care, I think, when their father died. And he said, with all of the power struggles and the rebellion going on, I'm going to keep you in the Tower of London to keep you safe. And then they were never heard from again. And legend had it, did he have them murdered? Did he not? And this is Alison Weir trying to solve that with the little that we know.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever know. Alison Weir does her homework, so this is a very good book. And now we get to The War of the Roses by Dan Jones. I've read other books about the War of the Roses. This is the one that made the most sense to me. It was laid out in such a way that I felt like I finally had a handle on who was on what side, who changed sides and why, and, well, I did know how it ended. But nonetheless, this book I thought was excellent. There are others out there. This is my favorite. I really like Dan Jones. Not quite reading like a novel, but close. And his scholarship is excellent. I would highly recommend this over any other book on the War of the Roses. And I've looked at a couple. This is my favorite. And last, because you have to kind of have a nice ending to it all, The War of the Roses ends at Bosworth Field with Henry VII, who had, if you follow all of the genealogy charts, a rather slender claim to the throne.
But given that everyone else was dead,
He
snatched it.
He had, he went to, he was an adventurer. He really had no choice. I mean, he was under house arrest most of his life. He always had to watch his back. But who always had his back was his mother, Margaret Beaufort, and she worked for him. And she was determined that her son was going to be king. And he did, and it was audacious. It was amazing. Some people thought foolhardy, but he did it, and the winners write the history. And he won. He beat Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth, and this is the beginning of the Tudor dynasty.
And it also, learning about how he had grown up and how he ruled kind of helps explain why Henry VIII behaved the way he did.
Well,
I feel like he had to be so conservative and so paranoid that it made Henry VIII, it made that pendulum swing completely in the opposite direction for his reign.
Definitely, and because he was very careful and he always watched his back and he made sure his rivals were out of the way because he wanted peace in his life. He did not have a peaceful life. He was, as I said, always having to watch his back, and he was determined now that he was in charge, we're going to have peace, we're going to have security, and in order to do that, we have to have money. And so he knew how to raise money, he knew how to hold on to it, he knew how to spend it wisely, in my humble opinion. Henry VIII came to the throne, what was he, 17, 18 years old?
Not prepared to ever become king in the first place.
And, well, no, he actually had some time. I mean,
he had some training, but still, it was always meant to be his brother.
It was meant to be his brother, but what was he, 10 or 11 or 12 when his brother died? But Henry VIII was his own special person. He looked like his grandfather, Edward IV. He was big, he was bluff, he was the Golden Sun King again. And he liked all of that attention. He was a young man. He wanted beautiful things. He wanted a glittering court. He wanted to take his place on the stage of Europe. And he was willing to spend money to do it. And he was lucky. His father left him a very nice treasury, which he blew through rather quickly. And then he had to learn how to govern. But that's another story. This was a really good book. Also by Thomas Penn, as far as I know. The Brothers York and The Winter King are the only two he's written thus far. They're both winners. I really enjoyed them.
Well, given the massive time commitment, it would have been. I'm
oh
not surprised.
My goodness, yes. So, having done all of that, I would also recommend The Hollow Crown. Heather owns The Hollow Crown, and it's a series of productions with all of the history plays.
All of
Shakespeare's history plays. Starting with
Richard II. So they go in chronological order, so you can see how Richard II, spoiler alert, is usurped, and then see what Henry IV, Henry Bolingbroke's reign looks like later on, and how does his son look at what's going on.
Right.
And then you get to see Prince Hal turn into Henry V eventually. In my opinion, skip Henry IV Part 2.
It's not a great play.
It's so boring.
Nothing much happens.
There are 2 important scenes in there, and beyond that, it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
But Part 1 and Henry V, definitely.
Fabulous.
And then they followed it up 2 or 3 years later with The Hollow Crown, The Wars of the Roses.
Right.
So you get technically all parts of Henry VI. They did condense it into 2 parts instead of 3.
It was enough.
It was enough. They cut out some of those smaller rebellions, like the one with, I'm gonna have to look here because I can't remember his name.
The cast is amazing. It's absolutely worth your time. Our library has it. Check out your own library and see if they've got it.
With Let's Kill All the Lawyers.
Oh,
Jack
that one.
Cade.
Right,
That's his
Jack
name.
Cade.
They leave all of that out, but you get the important bits of the rebellion itself, and then leading into Richard III, which is where they end.
Yeah.
So technically they're about 3 parts each, if you follow our recommendation.
Right. It's really, really good. It's
Really
so very
good.
well done.
Such a brilliant cast,
Oh,
every
amazing.
single one. I mean, you start with Ben Whishaw, going into Jeremy Irons, Tom Hiddleston,
Benedict Cumberbatch.
what's his face, ending with Benedict Cumberbatch as Richard III, working in other fabulous people like Sophie Okonedo and Judi Dench,
Right.
and
Derek Jacobi.
Simon Russell Beale. I mean,
Yes.
everybody shows up.
It's
And
so worth your time.
It's really wonderful.
Yeah. So sometimes it's kind of nice to see it played out in front of you, and that's kind of fun. And always remembering that the Tudors won, and Shakespeare, had to depend on the Tudors, so everything is skewed a little bit.
In their favor.
Right, because, the winners write history, and that's just the way it is. But it's very well done, and it's such an interesting time period. It's endlessly fascinating. I don't know if I'm ever going to completely be comfortable with it, but it's real.
That's half the fun, isn't it?
That is. Every time I read a different book, or if I reread a book, I learn something new. I think, oh, how did I miss that the last time? Well, some of these books are enormous, so it's easy to miss some things, of course. But I hope this gives everyone a good idea. If you're interested in the War of the Roses, good ideas for places to start, things to look into, enjoy.
Well, thank you for walking us through that, and maybe one day I'll read through them. I'm not sure. I've gotten the important bits from you, which is good.
It's a time commitment. It is a
Yeah.
huge time commitment.
I'm not sure I'm ready for it just
Yeah.
yet. But if you are interested in any of these, leave them down below. If you have questions that you would like for us to try to answer,
Yeah.
we're happy to do that and give it a try.
Yeah,
If
I'm
not,
hardly an expert, but it's just something I'm interested in.
if not, we will direct you to someone who maybe can.
Yep.
Or if you have any other recommendations for follow-up books to
Yes.
further this search, since there is so much to look into.
Yeah, I'd be very interested.
And until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye, everyone.
Bye.